Welcome to the Brothers View podcast with two brothers, same mother, same father, grew up in the same house, but kind of taken different walks of life into our adult lives. Agree on more things that we disagree on, but kind of come to an agreement, taking two different paths sometimes. This is my brother Raymond, and I've known him my whole life. And
unfortunately.
So it's cool. We tend to offend. Our viewpoints aren't, hey, they might be woke, they might not be woke, but there are viewpoints.
They're honest.
Yeah, I like that. They're honest. We grew up in the 80s. We grew up in the G.I. Joe era.
Of course.
We were proud to be Americans, right?
Absolutely.
Our father's retired Marine, retired Homeland Security.
Of course.
Our father's been a patriot, right?
Absolutely.
I think we're patriots.
I like to think so.
I'd like to think so. Even though maybe some of our viewpoints, quote, unquote, said patriots wouldn't agree with.
We get into the definition of patriotism.
And that's good. And that's good because we're going to have a segment later where we're going to define what a patriot is. And we're going to kind of, all right, good. So one of the things that I like about our conversations, and I call it the Raymond policy, you touched on why kind of we are where we are today in terms of our leaders, in terms of people taking opposing views, political, everything. Just tell us the Raymond policy.
It's basically based on the concept of compromise. We need to be able to understand where the other person is coming from. So you should be able to hear another person's argument, their point of view, their worldview, how they've come to their conclusions, and not necessarily buy into it or endorse it, but just understand where they're coming from and then use that as a framework for your interactions with that person. I understand how this person sees the situation.
Yep.
So therefore, I should be able to understand what they want and then deal with them in that way. And then on the same token, that other person should be receptive to your points of view, even though they might be drastically different, and then find a common ground and just work forward. But then you have to be able to agree to disagree. You have to be able to have those conversations. You have to listen to somebody who has a different point of view that might even seem foreign or nonsensical to you, but still treat that person with respect.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is respect at the end of the day, because, you don't know how people grew up, how they were raised. I lived in Africa for a long time, and some of the things that they do and say, I feel that it's extremely passive. And I'm like, dude, you guys got to step up. But then again, I'm coming from America, Starbucks in every corner, McDonald's forever. And, it's different. You're right. You got to take, and I would like to say in my 40 plus years of existence, I've finally learned, or I've finally evolved to try and understand the other person's point of view, see where they're coming from, and maybe what could I have done differently, especially in terms of a conflict. And I think that's really evolved from, our conversations and understanding, the Raymond policy. And, like you said, compromise is a dirty word. And if I compromise, then I'm giving in, right? I'm not staying true to my base.
We basically had decided, in the current political climate, we basically decided that if you are compromising, you have no convictions. Because if you have convictions, you have to die by them.
Right.
You know what I mean? And therefore, you cannot compromise. To compromise, you have to give up a little bit of your conviction to make room for the other person.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? The pieces have to mesh together. And if you're going to come in and not budge on anything, you're never going to find that common ground. You'll never find a way to work together and meld into a single entity.
That's like the definition of politics, right?
It's supposed to be. It's not what it is now, but
Yeah.
that's what it's supposed to be.
True that. And, talking about politics, and you're in the healthcare industry.
Of course.
When Obamacare, healthcare marketplace first came out, right? I was a huge proponent of it.
Of course.
And, plus because of the industry I'm in the tax industry, I had to learn it, had to help people apply the credit. I really saw this as being the thing. But you, working boots on the ground, had a drastically different view from it. And I kind of felt that, how come we can't have free healthcare, dude? I mean, we're the most powerful nation in the world. Why can we not have free healthcare? What is stopping us? Is it back to the compromise, or?
So obviously I work in healthcare, and not everybody in healthcare would have the same.
Sure,
As I do.
You're not the spokesperson, right?
Of course. But I think the issue is that when we looked at the Affordable Care Act and what they were trying to do, what everybody now calls Obamacare, The concern or the issue that I had with it from the very beginning is because it never addressed the root cause of why healthcare costs more money in the United States. The only
Okay.
thing that the Affordable Care Act did was address how we paid for said healthcare. So, from my point of view, it really was just a reform of healthcare insurance, not a reform of healthcare costs.
So we're saying the insurance is why healthcare is so expensive?
No, I'm saying that that program only addressed how the healthcare got paid for
Okay.
and never got to the root cause of why healthcare costs so much money. We're kind of like we're arguing about the amount of gasoline that goes into the car without actually paying attention to what we're paying for at the pump.
Okay.
You know what
Okay.
I'm saying?
No,
You
that's a good
can't-
analogy.
You can't work both issues. We can't
Yeah.
just say, "Oh, I have a 50-gallon tank," without paying attention to the fact, okay, well, gas at one point cost $1, now it's $3, now it's $4. Okay, you can't divorce these two issues because we have to get into, well, how much fuel did the car need? How much, gas can I carry? All of that has to play into it. So the Affordable Care Act only took one piece of the issue and didn't address the rest of it. And to me, the fundamental issue is any healthcare procedure, take insurance out of the equation, any healthcare procedure that happens in the United States costs more money than it does anywhere else. If you can't answer that question, how you pay for it is irrelevant.
So someone's going to argue, oh, because they went to better schools, because they got educated in the United States, because we have to pay people a higher wage. But I know you've worked with doctors from other countries, and you're gonna say BS and all of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, half of our doctors come from
Other countries.
They went to their the concept that somehow healthcare education is superior in the United States over the rest of the world is utter nonsense.
Okay.
Okay, we have healthcare organizations that work at the national level, but they work in conjunction with what the European Society of Healthcares are doing, what they're doing in the Japanese healthcare societies, and that's just to name a few. I'm sure there's multiple European, Russian, Chinese. All of these folks are all contributing to the information and the data that we're gathering when it comes to research.
Yeah.
Okay, and a lot of pioneering techniques and diseases and diagnoses come from us from other countries.
From other
as well.
countries, yeah.
So this idea of somehow we have the marketplace on superior healthcare is just not true.
So why is it so expensive?
That's the fundamental
Your
question.
opinion. Your
that's
opinion.
never-
Your opinion from what you've seen, because I know you've told me there's two costs. There's the true cost, and then there's the insurance cost. And if you can pay for it out of pocket, 9 times out of 10 it'll be cheaper. And I think you even told me, or you said you didn't even go back to your insurance company and get reimbursement when you paid out of pocket. So that's why I thought the insurance company is what makes it more expensive.
I think what makes it more expensive is that nobody wants to pay attention to what things actually cost. They only want to pay attention to how much am I paying out of my pocket,
Oh, for sure.
right?
Yeah, I don't care what
So,
it costs. I care what I'm paying.
I know I care about what my deductible is. I care
Yeah.
what I'm paying for my insurance. I'm not actually paying attention to how much my individual exam actually costs.
Okay.
Okay. No one pays attention to the fact that if I went to the grocery store and bought a bottle of Tylenol, okay, it costs significantly less
Yeah.
than if I received Tylenol generic at the hospital.
Exactly. And
Okay.
they're supposed to have their own pharmacy there and everything. I thought that would make it more affordable, but it's the opposite.
It doesn't. And it has to do, I think, with how we have to, or the attempt for the healthcare industry to distribute the cost. In other words, we have to account for the individual who doesn't have the ability to pay for it. So that has to then get broken down across the entire system,
Okay.
which means that the people who can pay for it have to basically pony up a little extra to offset for the rest of it.
Okay.
Okay. Where we talk about the insurance companies contributing to the problem is that the insurance companies have to collect the data. They have to account for all of these individuals, and then basically that's how they average cost out their insurance. That's how they calculate their business. I mean, otherwise the business is not sustainable.
So the admin costs of running an insurance company factor into the cost of healthcare as well.
I mean, yeah,
Right?
paperwork is always going to be an
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
That's not. But what I'm referring to more specifically is we have to account for the person who's going to show up to the healthcare system who doesn't have insurance, doesn't even have a social assistance program. He has nothing. But that person still has to be cared for.
Right.
Okay. So therefore, we take that person's cost, okay, and we distribute it amongst the people who can afford it, okay, and distribute that cost there. Now, that only works if we have a fundamental framework as to how many people are going to show up with no way of paying.
Okay.
Because the more people that show up that we didn't know, weren't part of the system, they weren't part of any social assistance, they weren't part of any healthcare program, they weren't part of healthcare insurance, they were unaccounted for. They show up at the hospital. They still need to get paid for. The insurance has to somehow account for those people. There was no accounting for them. So then that cost then gets distributed. So we have to make estimates. We have to make all these different things.
Inflate the cost or whatever.
So the insurance company doesn't end up broke. They have to basically tack that on to everybody else.
That's why your premiums go up.
Okay. But the hospital has to do the same thing. The
Okay.
hospital also has to take in those patients. The hospital can't wait to verify if we can get this person on a program. Obviously, there's a whole bureaucracy and setup so that we can get those individuals
Right.
that assistance and hopefully find them a program to deal with this. But at the end of the day, hospital's still going to care for that person.
So, like, the Affordable Care Act, from what I understood, it went into effect and it effectively gave 30 million uninsured Americans insurance, which is roughly 1/10 of our population. Would that not kind of like to go with your argument? All of a sudden, all these uninsured people now have insurance. Why didn't that bring down the cost of healthcare? And it did it a complete opposite. And I know kind of the reasons. I'm kind of being devil's advocate, but like the government injected all this money, another form of insurance to insure the uninsured, but then prices just went up anyway. So like, what did we do wrong? How did we get it wrong?
No. That action guaranteed that prices were
I agree with you.
okay,
but
it's simple
yeah,
economics. It's a law of supply and demand. People who had no health care, therefore they got no assistance,
Yeah.
which is terrible. These people were suffering. They weren't getting any help. But all of a sudden they had health care, so they all went to the hospital. The hospital has limited resources
Supply and
based
demand.
on
Yeah.
what was available. All of a sudden, all these people showed up. You have the giant demand. There was a limited supply. Prices go up. And it sounds inhumane to talk about that when we talk about healthcare.
yeah, you got to look
But
at
yeah,
it as a business. You do.
Well, it still has to get paid for.
Yeah.
And business is how we pay for things.
Yeah, and I think you do a lot of you're privy to a lot of the admin stuff in the hospital. Most of the time, they don't make money, right? Everybody thinks hospitals are making money. Would you say they make money?
There are paper thin margins.
Okay.
The margins that most hospitals operate under are not margins that any reputable business would find acceptable.
Okay. Yeah.
We're talking like between 1 and the most profitable hospitals to be somewhere around 4%
It's just terrible.
rate of return.
Yeah.
So if you're a businessman, you're going to go, okay, you're going to spend all this money, you're going to do all these resources, overhead, payroll, all this other stuff, so you can make a 1% rate of return.
Yeah.
Okay. That's considered a successful hospital because they're actually in the green.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's not really a business model.
True. And they get a lot of donor funds too, right?
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
That depends on your hospital and your organization, the politics, and all that other stuff. I mean, some hospitals are better at that than others.
I equate Obamacare or Affordable Care Act to student loans. We gave
It's very similar.
people money, right, to go to school. What do the schools do? Slowly over time, right, jacked up their prices where now people come out with that debt and it's just, they're worse off in some instances than if they would never have just gone.
My only problem with describing it that way is
Uh-huh.
it makes it sound like the evil colleges decided to be greedy and start raising prices.
Yeah, we can't, but it's economics.
No, right. It's simple
economics,
economics. I only
yeah.
have so many seats.
Yeah.
I have more and more people applying for those seats, then
Mhm.
the prices
price
go
has
up.
to go
That's
up.
just the nature of
It becomes more competitive too.
Of course.
Because now we got other people.
Yes.
And I bring colleges or universities because I think they operate similar to hospitals. They require donor funds, and there's limited.
Yes.
And colleges really require, universities really depend on the alumni and you know the community as well to
Donor
help.
funds, but also there's a lot of grants that are involved. So a lot of research and
Yeah.
everything. That also is a large source of income, both for hospitals and for colleges. You know,
Right.
if there's a research project or something that's being funneled through the university because they have the necessary resources, that also brings a lot of additional funds to those institutions. So that's kind of another
buffer.
source of revenue
Yeah.
that gets worked in there. That's not just part of the profit model.
You ready to get controversial?
Of course. Always.
All right. So I wanted to do something safe to start us off,
Okay.
but we can't ignore it.
Right.
Gaza.
Uh-huh.
All right. So we grew up in the 80s. Our father's a Marine. We were taught staunchly, if that's even the right word, that is Israel's our allies. The United States is ally. Israel's surrounded by the big bad Middle East. So we have to help defend them, right? Who's right? Who's wrong? Can we even do that simple?
I at this point, I think it's so far removed from any sort of logical, reasonable behavior
Yeah.
on every person involved that you can't say one person's right or wrong.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? This is the reality that a person sees, and people feel threatened, and therefore they're reacting.
They react.
With violence.
So let's agree on, and you and I always talk about this. We got to set a premise, right? So let's agree on said facts, right?
Common ground.
It's common ground, right? So let's say we agree Gaza's a strip of a patch of land of roughly 200 square miles.
I wouldn't know the number, but okay.
Okay. And within this 200 square mile patch, we've got 2.5 million Palestinians that are kind of forced to live there. They're not allowed to leave. They go fishing. They can only go fishing, I believe, something like 2-3 miles off the coast. They got to come back. And that's fact, right? And then on said day of infamy, Palestinian, you can't say Palestinian, right? We got to say Hamas, right? Because it's not Palestinians, right? It's Hamas,
Correct.
which
That's
let's agree,
fair, yeah.
it's right. Let's agree Hamas is a terrorist organization. Can we
From
agree
my
with that?
point of view.
Right. I think everyone agrees that. So Hamas now breaks through the Gaza Strip border, security, whatever, and starts shooting and killing people and blowing shit up. All right. And then subsequently, maybe a couple hours later, they do the same thing on the other end of the Gaza Strip. I forgot what that port of entry or
Right.
border is called, right? And then they blow shit up and kill people there, right? And they kidnap, I think, like 100 some odd people.
No, it's as of right now, we still have 240 people unaccounted for
Okay.
that are believed to be kidnapped and held hostage in Hamas. So how much was originally kidnapped versus now, but we still have over 240
Okay.
as of right now. So
more-
obviously it was a bigger number.
All right, yeah, obviously it's a bigger number. So at least 200 plus people kidnapped, taken across the border, some beheaded, some murdered, plus the ones that were murdered in the actual, they're calling it a war. I was going to say skirmish. I think that'll be an injustice to what's happening. So let's call it a battle, all right? And then maybe a day later, Israel blows the shit up out of Palestine with tanks and bombs and all kinds of shit, right? Just blows them up. In that process, non-Hamas civilians that are Palestinians get killed in the process. And now we're faced with, you either agree with the Palestinian plight, that they are the injured party, or you're forced to say, no, Israel has the right to defend themselves. And and you have to be on there. Like, I kind of feel like no one's talking about, which we're going to talk about. This is the last fact that we agree on. You're either with Hamas or you're with Israel. That's kind of like the narrative right now. Not Hamas, I'm sorry. You're either with Palestine or you're with Israel. Is that a fair assessment? Like, that's what the narratives are right now?
I think that's what everyone's trying to push, and I think we're and this goes back to the whole concept of compromising and trying to understand the other person's point of view. Is we shouldn't have to choose between supporting Israel and being sympathetic to the Palestinian people.
Agreed.
Okay, if we wanted to say that this is either you support Hamas or you support the Israeli argument, that's as close as you can get, but understand that the Palestinian people, regardless of what side you choose there, are the ones who are suffering because of this. Okay? Now, obviously, Israel was attacked, and I'm not taking anything away from the suffering that they're enduring, okay? But this situation, this status quo, is hurting the Palestinian people, innocent individuals, okay, to a far greater degree. So as sympathetic as I am towards Israel, and I'm prepared to defend most of their actions in the sense of, okay, you're a sovereign nation, you need to defend your autonomy, you were essentially attacked, and the actions of Hamas are placing Palestinian individuals, citizens, free, innocent civilians, in harm's way because of the way that Hamas is doing this. But if Israel doesn't respond, then the Palestinians aren't getting hurt. Okay? But then they have to respond. Okay?
Yeah.
So it's a catch-22. There are no winners in this scenario.
Yeah.
And when you start saying, oh, I support this person or that person, what do you mean support? I mean, what are we hoping is going to be the outcome here?
True. So I agree, categorically agree with you. Where I'm confused is how we grew up, Israel having its rights to defend itself. Dude, Israel's always, you throw a rock at Israel, they throw a tank at you. You throw two rocks, they throw an F-16, Tomcat, Hellcat, whatever, and blow your shit up. I have always thought that their response has always been way over the top. It's like if someone steps on your shoe and then you just cold cock them and punch them as hard as you can. That's not an appropriate response. Were you wronged? Yes, he stepped on your shoe, but and I'm not trying to say the atrocities that happen are equivalent to stepping on shoes, but I've always felt that Israel's taken it too far. At the same time, this country's always been 100% behind whatever Israel does. Maybe there's a tiny little fraction or segment of the population that was complaining, but we've always been 100% behind Israel. Something has changed. And I don't know if it's because of the internet, because more people are able to see what's happening and now everyone has an opinion. But I don't feel that the same amount of Americans support Israel anymore the way they used to. And I feel like there's a growing support or sympathy for what's happening with Palestine. And I think a lot of folks don't understand how to separate Palestine from Hamas, or Hamas from Palestine, whichever one is the correct way of saying it. But again, I think the fact that you have to just you're either with one side or you're with the other side, we're never going to solve the problem. And I don't know if we ever will. This has been going on for what, like a long time, longer than you and I have ever been alive, right? Yeah. And I don't know. I wish we could find a way where we can kind of talk about the actions that they take and maybe hold those people accountable when this is all said and done. Because I don't think this is a war. I do think it's close to genocide. I think it's just a superior force destroying with no guards, no responsibility, no safeguards, not withholding anything, just destroying a whole population. But, I'm still torn in half because I'm a G.I. Joe 80s baby. And I feel like we do need to give Israel that support. So I don't know. It's confusing. I feel bad about it, but
I think American demographics has changed so dramatically that's what shifted the quote unquote diminished support for Israel. Mm-hmm. Where when we grew up, it was rare that you ever heard of a Muslim individual prominent, specifically from the Middle East. Now, obviously, we had Muslims, of African heritage in the United States when we grew up with, but more and more, we're starting to see people from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from Iran immigrate to the United States and be accepted into American society.
So our population's changing. Is that what we're saying?
The thing is, it was very easy before to turn around and, like you said, and we're going through our effort to make the distinction between Hamas and Palestine, okay, and the Palestinian people. But in the 80s, when we grew up, those distinctions were not made.
True.
Okay? It was synonymous. At we basically every Palestinian was considered to be a member of Hamas.
Yep.
We didn't make that distinction.
Yep.
Today, we're going out of our way to make that distinction. But it's very easy for us to have said this blanket statement, oh, the Palestinians are bad, Hamas is bad, and lump them all together when you never met a Palestinian.
Yeah, true.
Okay? But now you have restaurants, people, classmates, doctors that you interact with. This culture has been humanized. Okay. Yeah. Now you see their perspective.
They're not on TV anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
exactly.
Here. Yeah.
They're here. This is person. They might be a friend of yours. They might be somebody you met at the gas station. They might be a coworker that you deal with. Mm-hmm. You cannot see that person as a member of Hamas. That person might have exposed you, educated you, got you to appreciate a little bit of Palestinian culture.
Yep.
Doesn't make us an expert on it. We understand that these people are human, who have the same problems as every other person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's true.
So now for then you to turn around and say, okay, because these evil people, as we're referring to,
quote
Hamas,
unquote, yeah,
okay, caused this action. All these other innocent Palestinians are also being swept up in this.
Yeah.
Okay. You cannot turn a blind eye to that suffering because we've humanized them. We've accepted, and that's part of. You mentioned the internet. We're being exposed to more cultures and more people, hopefully, through the internet, depending on how you treat your social media, which is a whole nother subject. Yeah. But you have to be careful when we use these blanket statements and paint everybody. And while we're making that effort to separate it, when we grew up, those efforts weren't made.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We
That's
lumped
true, yeah.
everyone. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Every Muslim was a terrorist when we grew up.
Yeah. Yeah. Muslims and Russians. They were the bad guy growing up.
End of story. And
Yep.
it was never questioned. Nobody said, "Oh, we
Yep.
need to understand the Russian or the communist point of view. The terrorists, are real people." Nobody ever had that
That's true.
conversation. You know what I'm saying?
It was un-American.
Of course.
It was un-American.
And automatically, if you wanted to have a movie where there was violence and blowing up and the military showing the military might, all you had to do was stir up a bunch of terrorists and nobody cared about how many people got killed.
That's true. That's true because it
'Cause they were
dehumanized them.
terrorists.
Yeah, no,
exactly.
you're right.
And that's the issue. Now,
Yeah.
the region has been more humanized because we're more exposed to that.
Even now the Call of Duty games and what have you.
Yes.
You're fighting Muslim terrorists. You're fighting. The only thing I like about it is they allow you to go back and fight Nazis. I don't think anyone is going to lose the argument. Let's just go kill a bunch of Nazis in a video game setting
True.
and get backlash.
But that-
you know what I mean?
But that creates also the perfect parallel, though, because there was a time frame when we equated Nazis with Germany.
Yeah. You know what? Good point. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
when we
Yep.
were in World War II and we wanted our soldiers to go over there and fight the Germans,
Yeah. There was
Okay.
no distinguish between Nazis and
it
Germans.
was all the same thing.
Yeah.
Never mind the fact that the majority of Germans really wanted nothing to do with the Nazi party. They had no choice.
True. So are we saying history is repeating itself? Again?
Constantly.
Again?
Constantly.
All right. For sake of time, we got to move on to our segment. And this is my favorite segment. But before we go into it, let's define what a patriot is. What's your viewpoint as a patriot? And a patriot, in the general sense of the word, what is a patriot?
I would say a patriot is a person who's proud of their country, their nation,
Okay.
okay, and is, as an individual, prepared to to contribute to society for the betterment of their nation.
Okay. I want to add, instead of nation, could it just be your tribe? You know what I mean? When I say your tribe, your people. Some people aren't going to be, when we say nation, right? Because nationalism is such a bad word, which I don't agree to. But when we say nation, people feel like, oh, I got to support my nation. But what if you're just repping your people?
The problem with repping your people is you're moving into too small of a subset. If you
Okay.
say patriot, the word patriot has to be rooted in the nation in question.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? If you're going to be a patriot, you're going to be a proud American. Okay? That means you're putting forth American ideals, regardless of where your ancestors came from. We're putting the American label ahead of whether you came back from Native American cultures, whether you came from African American, Hindu, Chinese, or whatever. You have put your lot and your identity as an American. And
Okay.
therefore, your patriotism is tied to that. Recognizing that the guy in England is patriotic on the same concept for England.
Right.
Okay, the guy from Spain who's being patriotic is pushing all of his ideals for Spain.
So patriotism and nationalism are related?
They're deeply rooted. It's
They're
very
deeply
hard to
rooted?
separate the two.
All right. All
It's
right.
very hard to separate the two.
So we got our segment. Pussy versus patriot. Can't be in the middle. You got to pick. They're either a pussy or they're a patriot. All right? And you kind of put yourself in a box. I'm going to join you. I'm going to join you. The only thing I'm going to add to your definition is I feel like the people makes a difference. I feel like you can be a patriot for your people. You can push the people, that movement forward for what you believe in, your fundamental core. To me, everything you said, but instead of country, I wanted to make it like your fundamental core.
Well, let's
You know what I mean?
distinguish country from government.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Whoa, that's tough. But yeah, okay, yeah, let's agree. Country from government.
Okay, because your government might not be acting in the best interest
Of
of
the
their
country.
citizens.
Yeah.
And as a patriot, it's your responsibility to push back against the government.
Okay.
So let's
Maybe
keep
we
that
should have
separation.
traded. But maybe we should have changed it to traitors versus patriots. Because
Well,
history determines that. But
true,
anyway,
true.
All right.
Traitor's a strong word, but okay.
Well, it leads us to our first candidate.
Yes.
I think his first name's Eric Snowden.
Yes.
Eric, right? Eric Snowden.
I think it's Eric. I don't
Eric
remember.
Snowden. We know who Snowden.
everyone
is.
knows Snowden.
He's the guy who released all the.
The documents and whatever.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
and I think that's how we found out that they listened to our conversations.
Yes.
The NSA is listening to our
We
phone.
learned a lot of dirty secrets about
Right.
the government through this individual.
So
Edward? Okay,
Edward
okay.
Snowden, thank
Edward
you.
Snowden, okay.
Hey, shout out to Uncle Louis Productions. Appreciate y'all. Producer, other brother from another mother, and father. But what's his name? Edward Snowden.
Yes.
Pussy or patriot?
Pussy, without question.
Pussy without question.
Without question.
But you just said
You gave me a binary choice between patriot and
I
pussy.
did.
Okay, I can't give him patriot. Has to be a pussy.
Okay. Even
You
though
you put it that box.
I did.
Okay, all right.
Just so you know, I agree with you. I think Edward Snowden's a pussy. I
Okay.
do. I think he put us in a weaker position by doing what he did.
Correct.
Why though? Because you said we're supposed to rise up against our government, right? Or
Yes.
you speak up.
Yes.
I think the NSA doing what they did was shady. I don't think it was correct. I think it's unconstitutional.
Correct.
You agree?
There's a
On
lot
its
of
surface?
Yeah, there's a lot of questionable behavior there.
So, just what justifies him? What pussifies him versus patriotizes him, if that's even a word?
The manner in which the information was released,
Yeah.
okay, was underhanded.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was not done in any way that improves the nation. It does nothing to address the problems that he quote unquote uncovered. Okay. It doesn't do you any good to just pull back the covers and say, oh, here's this mess. Because all you've done is embarrass the nation. You didn't do anything to try to move the situation forward.
Okay.
Okay. And then you knew your actions were illegal. Okay. If he had stayed and accepted prosecution,
Woo!
okay, which is obviously
Well, that's hero
it's
shit.
a big ass.
That's
a
hero
big
shit.
ass.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
But if he had stayed and accepted prosecution, okay, and through his defense pointed out that he is doing this to show how bad the quote unquote government
is,
was behaving, he'd be a freaking hero. He would go down in history as one of the greatest patriots.
I have to agree with you. I have to agree
okay,
with
but you just exposed it and then
you.
ran
He
away.
ran to Putin. He ran to Putin, right?
Okay.
That was
every
that was,
action that he did made the United States look worse and honestly weakened the government's position.
Right.
Not that we need to defend the government, but the government's supposed to take care of us.
Sure.
I'm saying that we put them there. That's what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So you went out of your way to weaken them. You did nothing to address the situation. Other individuals have stepped in with this information. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess he contributed to the solution, but honestly,
Yeah. He definitely went about it in a very irresponsible way. He could have done better. All right. We got two more on our segment here. Mia Khalifa. And the reason why I bring up Mia Khalifa is Mia Khalifa said, so allegedly she did porn for 3 months. That's what her claim is. But everybody knows Mia Khalifa as a porn star and of Lebanese descent, I believe.
yes.
It's the same Mia Khalifa that did a, can you call them movies? Porn movie? Porn shoot?
I thought most of her stuff was on social media. I didn't know there was an actual.
Yeah, she did. Okay, well, she did
Okay, I
some
never-
sort of
okay.
porn production
Right, right.
in a.
She's associated with the adult film industry, whatever.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. She did it. She wore a hijab,
Uh-huh.
and she ended up getting death threats from, I want to say Al Qaeda or ISIS. ISIS.
ISIS.
She ended up getting death threats from ISIS to say, "Hey, cut that shit out, whatever." They're gonna cut off her head. They did a meme of cutting off her head and some shit, and that scared the hell out of her. And eventually, plus other things, led to her getting out of the porn industry. But she's always been kind of very outspoken. She's done a couple of sports casts, whatever. Anyway, she made a statement. She's actually was a spokesperson or a brand ambassador for Playboy.
Right.
And Playboy, and I got to say this, I want to give you everything, is a publicly traded company now. I think Hugh Hefner took them public, or one of his descendants, or somebody who took over the company, but they're now a publicly traded company. My
Have been
point
for quite
is,
some time, yeah.
okay, good. So my point is, she made statements in support of Palestine, and the CEO of Playboy, who is Jewish, by the way, fired her and said we will no longer be associated with her. And she's made other, I don't know if he used hateful, but he used something like she's made other hateful comments in the past. So she
He
got
accused
fired.
her of being anti-Semitic, is what he did.
At the end of the day, yeah, you say it so much nicer in fewer words. So my point is, what's your patriot?
Patriot, without question.
Patriot without a question.
Without question.
Interesting.
The issue, from my point of view,
Uh-huh.
on this issue, let's
Yeah.
leave it to that, because I don't know enough about Mia Khalifa to comment on her
Right.
entire person. But on this particular issue, what I see is an American citizen, okay, expressing support, okay, for the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, she's not supporting Israel. She's entitled to that opinion, and she expressed it. Okay, in her statements, the only ones I've been able to actually find, okay, all she said was for the freedom fighters who are filming their activities, okay, to turn their phones sideways so we can get a wider perspective.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I read that.
Okay. I'm interpreting that to let everyone see the whole picture. Let's expose everything that's actually happening. Okay. She didn't endorse violence against anyone. She didn't support Hamas. She didn't call for death of Israel or anything. All she said was, let's expose what's really happening so we can see the suffering of the Palestinian people. There's nothing anti-Semitic about that.
Yeah.
Okay. And to be a patriot doesn't mean you blow flowery statements about the governments and everything that's taking place. To be a patriot is to acknowledge whatever your government is doing, whatever your people are doing it, dirty or ugly, okay, and then bring it out to the open and deal with it. As a patriot, as a member of it, if you want to bring attention to an issue,
Yep.
okay, you do so publicly and discuss it. That's the American way.
That is true. That is the American way. It was the American way. I kind of feel it's not the American way anymore because I feel like a lot of people won't step up and say things because they don't want to lose their job. And look, we're talking about her. She can probably land another gig tomorrow. But the average everyday American who says something and gets fired from their job when we're in this quote unquote possible recession or recession's looming, it's you know what? I'm not going to say anything. And you know the saying, evil wins when good men do nothing.
Right.
And I kind of feel like we're in that. We're in that. All right, last one for Pussy vs. Patriot, and this is a good one. Former President Donald Trump. And it's hard. I struggled with this one, and I actually didn't even want to put him on the list, but I felt that he embodies what this segment's all about.
Okay. I'm going to phrase this a little bit delicately. Okay.
Okay.
Because when we talk about a patriot, we talk about somebody who's putting forth the nation's best interests.
Yeah.
Okay. In his mind,
Okay.
he is doing that.
Right.
Okay. To the degree that he is capable of being anything other than a narcissist, he's absolutely a patriot.
I'm going with Patriot just because you can't call Donald Trump a pussy. I just don't. I think you
I
can't.
agree with that.
I just think I'm not. You and I, we go through this back and forth. The man could be arguably the best president to ever walk the face of the earth if he went around things in a totally different way.
Yes.
If he got his policies are sound, but the way they come out and how the sense of division that I get, and of course half the country gets, because I mean he won by a narrow margin and he lost by a narrow margin. So
one of the things you talk about with Donald Trump is the fact that he never apologizes.
yes, I love
Okay.
that. That's number one in sales.
So we admire that about him.
yeah,
He has his point of view and he's completely unapologetic about it, which is admirable. But there's a negative portion of that, which is what Trump haters are really focusing on, is that also means you're unsympathetic. He's incapable of seeing the other people's point of view, okay, to the point that it's not a question of what he says is offensive. It's a question of he's going out of his way to be offensive. As if somehow, by being offensive, he's somehow achieving something. And half the time, I think he's accidentally being offensive, but because he wants to be unapologetic, can't somehow correct it, clarify his position, and people just run with it to a ridiculous degree.
he is the biggest, baddest bully of our time. That man's a bully. He bullies you into submission, gets the job done, except for this last time he lost. But love him or hate him, that man's a winner, dude.
So in science fiction, which obviously I'm a big fan of, but there's a concept that always gets thrown around, okay, where we say, I reject your reality and substitute my own.
Okay.
Okay. Donald Trump is probably the most successful political, social, public figure has ever implemented this. He lives in his own world.
Reality.
Okay.
His own world.
And somehow forces all of us to interact in it.
So we got to go. But we said this. We've been talking about Trump for the last 25 years or something like that, right?
Our
Since
entire adult lives.
Our entire adult
Donald
lives. Trump
part
has
of the
been.
public consciousness.
Anyway.
Yes.
So, for sake of time, we're going to cut it here. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
You want to do it
It's
again?
fun. Absolutely.
All right, cool. It's been fun. Tune into the Brothers View. Appreciate you guys spending time with us. We'll have more exciting stuff to talk about next time. And we'll see you guys next time. Thank you. Good. Thank you. Good job, Ray.
Thank you.